Okay, good afternoon, evening, or morning, everyone, wherever you are in the world. My name is Bas Werker. I'm in Tilburg, associated to Netspar, and I'm going to chair the next session. The rules are exactly the same as for the first session, 15 minutes per paper, and then room for questions. And I'd like to invite Chiara Ardito to share her screen so that we can see her slides. She will talk about the increase in female retirement age in the Italian pension reform.
Thanks a lot to the organizers for this interesting colloquium and for giving me the possibility to participate and present our research. We are going to we assess the impact of the pension reforms that in Italy raised the normal retirement age for women on several health and labor market outcomes. This is a joint work with a lot of colleagues from Milano and Torino. So I'm going to start. Just a quick background, as we all know, under the pressure of aging population and the tendency toward early retirement over the last decades, several countries had to manage this challenging situation by trying to reform pension rules in order to keep people longer at work and trying to reduce the pension expenditures by delaying pension claiming. One of the main policy tools was indeed the tightening of the eligibility conditions by raising the minimum age for claiming a pension or reducing the incentives for early retirement. However, there is the concern that poor health, outdated skills, limited labor market opportunities for older workers might hamper their possibility to actually extend working life. And also, especially for categories of workers exposed to more physically and psychologically demanding working conditions, there is concern that extending exposures to these conditions might be detrimental for their health. The literature on the health consequences of increasing age at retirement is far to be conclusive, as shown by recent meta-analysis. Results tend to differ substantially depending on the methods adopted, the context, and the health outcomes analyzed. However, there is a growing, I would say, stream of research adopting causal designs that tend to show that rising pension age might be detrimental for health for specific categories of workers exposed to more manual jobs like blue-collar workers. The literature on the consequences in terms of labor market outcomes of rising pension age, so the effect on employment and retirement trajectory and program substitution toward other alternative exit routes, so unemployment, disability, is more homogeneous, providing more clear pattern of results. Most of these studies, there are a large number of studies assessing pension reforms, so using a difference in different strategy, adopting the discontinuities between cohorts as a quasi-natural experiment to exploit the causal effect of the reform, and they tend to show that the increase in retirement in the statutory pension age induces a large drop in pension claiming, a less than proportional increase in employment, and some degree of program substitution toward employment or disability. This is quite more context specific. In this paper, we will analyze both health and labor market outcomes, focusing on the intended effect of the reforms, and we are going to look at the effect of rising pension age on employment and retirement trajectories, but also on the unintended effects, so looking what happened in terms of disability take-up, unemployment take-up. We will also look at the health risk of extending working life by looking at 4 groups of diseases widely recognized to be associated to work exposure, such as cardiovascular disease, musculoskeletal disorders, injuries, and mental health. And we are very interested in trying to assess whether there are specific categories of workers more exposed to risks of these unintended consequences. So we will run a bunch of heterogeneity analysis to detect these possible categories more at risk. How do we do it? We exploit different setup as a previous literature by exploiting the discontinuities induced by the reform between cohorts using administrative data, which provide us a certified information for all the outcomes, both health, labor, and benefit outcomes. In the working paper version, we also run a deep analysis on survey data on using share, assessing the impact of the reform on self-reported health outcomes. But today, I'm not going to show these share results. However, you can find it in the paper if you're interested. Just a quick background on the Italian institutional setting. The Italian pension system is public, founded by the mandatory contributions paid by employees and self-employed to the institute in charge for collecting contribution and paying pensions, which is the Italian Social Security Institute, the INPS. The public old age pension represents at older age the main source of income in Italy, while private pension plans, occupational pension plans play quite a marginal role still today. Currently, the system is an NDC for more recent cohorts, those entering in the labor market in the 90s, while for previous cohorts, and the cohorts under analysis in this paper, pension is still calculated applying a generous DB formula based on the average of the last 10 years of earnings. The pension reform that we are analyzing was implemented, was approved in 2011, somehow unexpectedly, under the pressure of a huge economic recession, the sovereign debt crisis. The reform was launched, proposed in December, and it was immediately effective since January. It was an extreme tentative to maintain the social security system, the financial sustainability of the system. One of the measures of the reform was the tightening of the normal retirement age for both women and men, but for women the increase was really substantial, from 60 to 67 in a gradual way, but as you can see, from 2012 up to 2009, there was an increase of 7 years of statutory pension age. And we will exploit the discontinuity between cohorts induced by the reform in normal retirement age. In particular, we will compare the cohorts of women born in 1951, cohort who could retire under the pre-reform rules, so at the age of 60, and our treated cohort will be the 52 cohort, the first cohort who had to wait 3 more years because of the reform and of the tightening of the normal retirement age. The data we are going to use is an administrative data set. It's called Work History Italian Panel WIP database. It's drawn from the Social Security records of the Italian Institute of Social Security. It's a random sample of individuals insured by the Italian Institute of Social Security. So it provides certified information on any job spells, pension, and benefit received by the worker for a long span of years. The Social Security records are linked to hospital discharge data from the National Archive of Hospital Discharges, and providing us information on each hospital admission, whether in private or public hospital, and the main diagnosis based on the international classification of the disease. Our sample of analysis, as anticipated, is built of women born in these 2 cohorts, in 1951 and 1952. We selected only those who were employed at 2003, and we follow them up to 2015. Basically, we build up a balanced panel composed of about 150,000 observations. Our identification strategy is different across ages and cohorts, and we estimated the probability of being in each labor market state, or the probability of being hospitalized for each of the 4 groups of the disease, as a function of a full set of interactions between the treated cohort, the 1952 cohorts, and the age dummies. Then we control for a full set of age dummies, individual fixed effect, and the linear time trend. So the parameter of interest that we are going to show in a few slides are deriving those from the interaction between ages and the treated cohort. And the interaction parameters for the ages above 60 will allow us to estimate the causal effect of the reform, while the interaction for the ages before the age of 60 will allow us to test the parallel trend assumption. So let's really look at the results starting from labor market outcomes. The figures display directly the parameter of the interaction between age and the treated cohort. Panel A shows the impact of the reform on the probability of claiming an old age pension. And as you can see, there is a huge drop after the age of 60, induced by the tightening, showing that the reform was successful in delaying pension claiming, reducing the probability of claiming pension by about 25 percentage points. At the same time, we also observe an increase in the probability of remaining employed at the treated ages by about 12 percentage points. So an increase less than proportional with respect to the claiming. In fact, there is a substitution toward our other benefits. People tend to be pushed out of the labor market anyway into unemployment, where we observe an increase of about 10 percentage points, and into disability pension, where the increase in this for this outcome is about 2 percentage points. Even though it is small in size, it's very high with respect to pre-reform means, corresponding to about a 100% percentage change. And interestingly, importantly, we can see that in the pre-reform ages, we see coefficients that fluctuate around 0, so providing support to the parallel trend assumption in our setup. Turning to the health outcomes, so we studied the effect of the reform on the probability of being hospitalized for 4 different groups of diseases. We found a null effect on musculoskeletal disorders and on cardiovascular disease. While results show that there is an increase in the probability of being hospitalized for injuries and for mental health in correspondence of the ages of 62 and 61, although it's temporal and not lasting any following ages.
Yeah, can I just briefly interrupt on the previous slide, because it's hard to read the vertical axis. So how large are these increases?
The increases are small in magnitude. For example, the increased probability of being hospitalized for injuries is 0.5 percentage points. However, this corresponds to a quite large increase in terms of percentage change with respect to pre-reform mean, because baseline average in the sample are low, and correspond to about 70 percentage point increase, percent increase.
Okay, thank you.
And also for mental health is quite small, is a 0.25 percentage point. So going to the heterogeneity analysis, we are interested in understanding whether the reform hit on different categories of workers in a different way. So we assess whether there was a different effect of the reform by socioeconomic position, by looking at the manual, at the main occupation in the pre-reform ages, distinguishing workers between the manual and non-manual jobs, and depending on their wage level, below and above the median in the sample. For both the indicators, we found a gradient, a clear gradient. Lower socioeconomic position women display the highest drop in pension claiming, so they were the more constrained by the reform to delay pension. They are also more likely to take up disability and unemployment, whereas they are equally likely to extend employment. In contrast, we don't find any difference between socioeconomic position in the effect of the reform on hospitalizations. We also investigate whether there are heterogeneous effects by health status. So we compare individuals, we stratify the sample into individuals having good health, bad health, and very bad health, using as a proxy for health the number of hospitalizations for any cause in the pre-reform years, so at 49, 57 years old. And again, we find a striking gradient. Women with worst health, indicated by the green color in the figures, women with worst health are the most constrained by the reform in the labor market outcomes. We can see they are those extending more employment, dropping more the pension claiming, and taking more disability. However, the gradient also for the health outcomes. The results we found in injuries and mental health seems to be driven by those women with worst health. It's among them we found the largest increase in the probability of being hospitalized for these causes of disease because of the tightening of the normal retirement age. To conclude, we show that the 2011 pension reform was successful in reducing pension expenditure and extending the working horizon of the affected cohorts of women. However, there were side effects both on labor market and health, and these effects were concentrated among the most vulnerable in the labor market. Women with manual jobs with lower pay had more difficulties in extending their working life, and a large fraction of them were pushed out of the labor market before they reaching the statutory pension age through disability and unemployment. And we also found a clear gradient by health status. Those with previously poorer health are those more constrained by the reform to delay pension, extend work, but also are those driving the results, the negative health effect results. What are the implications, the policy implication of the results? We think that something can be done to reduce this adverse effect on the most vulnerable through targeted preventive and compensatory interventions that can accompany the tightening of the pension age. So workplace interventions to promote better working conditions, healthy and sustainable extension of working life, labor market policies to enhance the employment opportunities of older workers, because there might be demand-side issues. Firms might be reluctant to rehiring older workers close to retirement, so there is the need of intervention also on that side. And of course, in terms of pension rules, flexible and differentiated eligibility conditions should be implemented to compensate for the socioeconomic gradient in health and for the differential vulnerability to work-life extension. I concluded. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Chiara, for this nice presentation. And then I propose that we move on to the next presentation. That will be given by Xuan Zhang, and she will talk about labor supply and well-being among older adults.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. So first, I want to thank the organizers for including our paper in the session. So I'm Xuan. I'm an assistant professor at Singapore Management University. So this is joint work with my previous colleague, Joanne, so who is now at IMF. So in this paper, we look at the labor supply and well-being among older adults, the separate effects of pension access and statutory retirement age. Our motivation for this paper, for two reasons we want to study this topic, excuse me. The first reason is that, as we know, the population is aging. Therefore, to maintain the sustainable dependence on ratios, governments are wondering how older individuals' labor supply is affected by pension and retirement policies. And second, from the econ literature, we know that people's labor supply at older age are influenced by different factors. Specifically, we want to look at how financial incentives, reference point, and employers' labor demand differently affect the labor supply and well-being of the older population. Okay, so our research questions are the following. So first, we want to look at how does pension access and statutory retirement age affect labor supply of older adults, and what are the consequences for older individuals' income, savings, consumption, and subjective well-being. So specifically in the Singapore context, we can distinguish the retirement policies with the pension access. And also for the pension access in Singapore, we can look at separately the early pension access and the normal pension access. So for the early pension access, people can take out a lump sum withdrawal at age 55. And then for the normal pension access, this is more familiar with us. So this is the monthly pension payout at a later age. We call it the payout eligibility age. So in our analysis sample, this PEA is either 64 or 65. And in the middle, we also have this minimum retirement age, which is the age 62 during our study period. So to give you some preview of our findings, so first, we found that the early access to pension can reduce unemployment rate and increase self-employment rate and retirement rate. And then at the minimum retirement age, we found the big reduction in the labor force participation and employment rate. And then we found that people not only increase the retirement rate, but also the unemployment rate. And then at the normal pension access, we only found weak evidence that people reduce their working hours. And next, we also look at the heterogeneous effect based on a person's pension wealth. And we found that the main effect at age 55 from the unemployment to self-employment is mainly driven by those people with low pension wealth. And then for the labor reduction, for labor supply reduction at the MRA, it is mainly driven by the medium wealth men. For the high wealth men, we found the reduction in labor supply at all ages. So they reduce, so they switch from the unemployment to retirement at age 55, and then they reduce their labor supply at the MRA, and also at the PEA, they also reduce their working hours, even though the result is just weakly significant. Note that our men analysis focused on men only, because the result for women are more noisier, and also the explaining factors for women's labor supply is more complicated. So our contributions of this paper are the following. So first, we provide evidence that the early access to pension may increase labor supply, where an increase in self-employment. Second, we found that the reference point plays a critical role in the retirement decisions for people with adequate retirement savings. And third, we found that the normal pension access has a pretty limited effect on the labor supply, which may be contradictory to the existing findings. However, this may be reconciled by the weak financial incentives from the Singapore's pension system. So due to the time, I will skip this outline. So our paper contributes to the following strands of literature. So first, we contribute to a bunch of papers looking at the mechanisms affecting the retirement timing. And the second and third, so our paper contributes to the literature, look at the labor supply and well-being of older people, and especially the self-employment among older people. And last, our paper contributes to the early access to pension in Singapore. So previous papers mainly look at the consumption and look at the health outcomes. So our paper provides new insight on the labor market outcomes. So now I want to give you some brief description of the pension scheme and retirement policies in Singapore. First, the Singapore's pension system relies on the Central Provident Fund, so the CPF. So this is a mandatory savings account, and it is a defined contribution scheme. Both the employers and employees are required to deposit part of their salary to this like CPF. People can start to access their pension from age 55. As long as they maintain some minimum amount of balance, they can take out any extra money beyond that minimum. So this minimum is different for homeowners and non-homeowners. So if you are a homeowner, the minimum amount you should keep in the account is relatively low. Alternatively, if you are not a homeowner, you have to maintain a higher amount in your CPF, and then you can take out anything beyond. So note that even if your CPF balance is below this BRS, the basic retirement sum, so people can still take out up to 5,000 from their CPF account. And then at the PEA, people can start to receive this monthly pension payout. And this is fully dependent on how much you have in your CPF account. And we also have like a retirement ages. So in our study, we focus on this MRA, the minimum retirement age. So this is set to be 62 from 1999 to 2012 to 2022. Okay. So before this age, companies cannot ask people to retire just because they are old. Otherwise, they need to pay some compensation. And then we also have this re-employment age, but you can see this is pretty new and it has been changed several times in the past few years. So people are not really familiar with this re-employment age from our fielded questions in the survey. Therefore, we
just to be clear, I mean, you're at halfway your presentation in time, but only 1/3 of the slides. So maybe keep that in mind.
Okay, sure. I will. Yeah. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah. Okay. So for the unique institutional settings of Singapore, you can see that the pension access age and the retirement age are separate, and also at the pension access, there is no a tax on your labor earnings. Sorry, there is no tax on the pension take up for the pension withdrawal, and also the pension payout is totally actuarially fair. So this makes the financial incentives at the pension access age is pretty simple. It is mainly about this liquidity effect. And then at the MRA, however, we have both the reference point and the employer's demand for labor. Although we cannot perfectly distinguish these two, we are trying to separately look at the reference point and the employer's demand for labor. And then again, at the normal pension access, it is the liquidity effect play a role. So our data is this Singapore Life panel. So it includes a nationally representative sample age 50 and above. So this is a monthly panel data, and that's why we can study the the immediate response to each age cutoff. And we restrict the time period to January 2016 to January 2020, in case the COVID may change the labor supply and well-being of these older people. And we have about 8,000 respondents in each wave, and we have a bunch of various outcome variables. So our empirical strategy relies on this simple regression discontinuity design. So we basically look at how people change their behavior and the associated well-being bound they reach these 3 different age cutoffs. And our interest is this 4. So in our main specification, because we restrict the window to just 12 months before and 12 months after, so we use this linear control of this distance in months from the age cutoff. And we have also done a few robustness checks, and basically all of our results hold. Okay. So I only have 5 minutes left. Okay, so now I want to first briefly show you the regression discontinuity graph for the age 55. So here we have the non-parametric local mean smoothing. And you can see there is some discontinuity, but not very significant from this non-parametric fitting. And then this is the regression discontinuity graph at age 62, the MRA. And you can already see that we have very clear reduction in the labor supply. And then for the PEA, again, we have some a reduction in the full-time working status, but not others. So now I'm going to tell you our main results. So first, this is our average effect for men for the labor for the labor market outcomes. So at age 55, we can see clearly that there is a decrease in unemployment rate. And these people, they switch either to the self-employment or they just retire. So at MRA, the results are pretty significant. So we find the reduction in the labor force participation rate. So this is due to the reduction in the employment rate. And we find most of them decide to retire. However, we also find some marginally significant results for the unemployment rate. So the unemployment in the data is defined as not having a job but looking for a job. So this is the involuntary separation from their job. And then at the PEA, we only find this evidence for the reduction in the full-time working status, but not significant result for the other like labor supply. So as for the like the other consumption, the household financial conditions, and the life satisfaction, the results are pretty like limited. So at age 55, we found nothing. And then at the MRA, we found that there is a reduction in household income along with the reduction in the labor supply. And also people are less satisfied with their economic conditions. So for the PEA, also we basically found nothing for their like consumption, household finance, and their well-being. And next, we look at the heterogeneous effect. So we start with the people with low pension wealth, and we find that the main results we found for the for all the population is mainly driven by this low pension wealth men. So the switch from the unemployment to self-employment is mainly driven by them. And at the MRA, they do not respond at all. So even though there is some reduction, none of them are significant. And then for the PEA, again, we found that they decrease their employment rate due to the access to pension. So for the other outcomes at age 55, we found nothing for this low pension wealth men. And at the MRA, even though we do not find any significant reduction in their labor supply, we do find the reduction in their monthly income. And at the PEA, we again found nothing. So for the medium pension wealth men, the main result is that they reduce their labor supply at the minimum retirement age, because these people, they already have like relatively sufficient retirement savings. And then for them, we also found that at age 55, they take out money, so they increase their household income and monthly savings, and they also marginally increase their consumption. And at the MRA, they also increase their consumption. And at the PEA, they do not respond. So last, for people with high pension wealth, we found that at age 55, they also reduce their unemployment rate, which is quite surprising. But for this high pension wealth men, they choose to retire. And then at the MRA, we found similar result as the medium wealth men, so they reduce their labor supply and for a larger magnitude. And at the PEA, they only weakly reduce their full-time working status. Okay, 1 minute left. So for the for this like other outcomes, we basically find they have some like a lower household income actually against the early pension access, and then their satisfaction becomes worse at the MRA, and at the PEA the results are like generally small except for this satisfaction with life. So I'll skip this one. So last to conclude. So we found that the early pension access reduces unemployment rate, increases self-employment rate due to this low pension wealth men, and people also increase the retirement rate, and this is driven by those with high pension wealth. And for the MRA, it serves as a reference point to retire for men with adequate retirement savings. But workers also face demand-side barriers upon turning the MRA, as suggested by the increase in the unemployment rate. And compared to the early pension access and the statutory retirement age, we found that the normal pension access in Singapore has a pretty limited impact on the labor supply. And household income decreases at the MRA, resulting in a lower satisfaction with economic conditions. So consumption is generally smooth, and life satisfaction and health satisfaction are also generally similar across different age cutoffs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We move on to the next presentation, and we go from Singapore to Thailand. Phitawat.
Thank you for having me in this conference. So today I'll present my joint work with Nada and Poonpolkul, and I would like to also thank cepar because this work also benefits from the cepar grant. So the title of this work is Aging Inadequacy in Fiscal Constraint in the Case of Thailand. So I think we will see some sort of different picture from Singapore here in the case of Thailand. So just to give you a very quick preview. So Thailand is one of the fastest aging country in Asia. And therefore there are a few questions that follow is whether it's the old age income adequate here in Thailand? Are the pension system sustainable? Are the proposed reforms feasible? So this paper tried to answer these questions by developing an ORG model calibrating to Thailand's data by focusing on two key old age income support, which is the social security system and the old age allowance. So we're trying to project that cost in the long run, but actually this is a little tricky because currently there's no indexation for the current schemes, which imply that both of these systems going to disappear eventually. So we need to make some assumption there. But with that assumption, we can also see that the social security system is unsustainable. So we also need to further analyze what would be the reforms required to make this system sustainable. And then we evaluate two proposals using VAT to finance a triple increase in OAA, and also to let OAA decreases with proportionally with the SS benefits. And before we go into that, I will just give you a very quick background on Thailand. So regarding Thailand population, we have a very fast aging country. So the population age over 65 will double from 13% to 26% over the next 20 years. And this naturally driven by declining fertility and increase in longevity. But on the fiscal side, this means that there will be more benefit recipients and less workers who pay income taxes and contribute to the social security scheme. So this will pose quite some pressure on the social security scheme. Another important background here in Thailand is regarding the labor market. While we have informal sectors still play quite a major role, we have an increase in formal sector. And this is partly due to the shift in agriculture to manufacturing sector. But the thing is more complicated because the formal and informal are actually quite connected. So we see that workers tend to exit from formal sector as they age. And actually on the right-hand side here, we can see number of workers at different age in the formal sector, right? And we can see that the number decline as people age. So people actually start exiting to informal sector quite young, around age of 25 and 30. And a lot of people doesn't actually come back. So we also need to take this into account when we do the modeling, right? And this figure here, I try to show all the old age income support in Thailand. So how to read this figure on the x-axis, this shows income during work years. So on the right-hand side, these are people with high income. And on the left-hand side, these are people with low income. And on the y-axis, show pension benefits. So what we can see from this figure is that we actually have quite high coverage. So almost everybody in Thailand receives some sort of old age allowance or some sort of the old age income support. But the benefits are quite inadequate for the majority of population. So at the bottommost here, we have the old age allowance, which is the universal pension for almost everybody. But the amount is very low. We have welfare card for the poor. And for the formal employees, we have the social security system, and we have civil servant pension scheme. And then we also have national pension saving funds and Article 40 for the informal. So what I will touch on today, our research focus on the largest area here, which is the OAA, the universal pension, and the social security scheme. So due to time constraint, I'll just jump right into the model very, very briefly. So the framework we use here is to use a partial ORG model with heterogeneous agents with two sectors. In particular, we have the formal sector and informal sector. Each of these two sectors will face different economic environment. Like the formal sector, we have to pay personal income tax and receive the social security benefits, whereas the informal sector does not have to pay these taxes, but only receive the old age allowance. Households are also heterogeneous in their age, in their wealth, in their sector, formal or informal, in their education. And we also keep track of a few variables which are used to determine how much benefit they get after retirement. We have endogenous labor supply, but we assume that the formal employees only decide on extensive margin whether to work or not to work, which more or less replicate the situation here in Thailand, because most people are on full-time contract. And for informal workers, they also can decide how much hours they want to work. We also introduced the exogenous formal to informal transition, trying to replicate this graph that you see here, that they have tendency to exit to the informal quite early on. And we also use the actual social security formula. So the pension that people get will be either in form of lump sum if the person contribute less than 15 years. And if they contribute equal to or more than 15 years, they will get an annuity, which is equal to 20% of the last 5-year income with additional 1.5% for each year on top of 15 years. So the longer you stay in the social, in the formal, the more annuity benefits they will get. And we also try to replicate some of the important trends in Thailand with a large informal sector, quite immature pension schemes, large income inequality between formal and informal, as well as between different education levels. We try to mimic Thai important trends like population aging, the rise in education level, as well as exit from formal to informal. So I won't go into details, but you can see model details in the discussion paper on the PIER research website. So let's jump right into the results. So what we have in the results here is that if we consider the long run, when doing nothing, actually, both of the two schemes will gradually disappear because due to the lack of indexation. So the benefits will lose their real value over time when price increases. And what we see is also that the Social Security scheme itself is also unsustainable due to the benefit formula that doesn't really take into account the actual cost of the Social Security system. So before we go further, we need to assume that both of these schemes are indexed to average income growth. But once we assume that they are indexed to average income growth, there are another problem, which is the increase in financing costs, right? So on the OAA, or the universal pension, indexing to income growth means higher cost, and the cost measured as percentage of GDP will increase from 0.8% to 2% in the long run. And this also caused debt to exceed the 60% threshold in around the year 2035. So to keep the debt sustainable at the 60% of GDP, then we also need to assume that the increase in the universal pension is financed somehow. So unlike advanced economy that have different tools in financing the increase in spending, like the personal income tax or wealth tax or asset tax, these sort of taxes are not quite plausible in Thailand due to a large informal sector, and also that all these wealth and assets are not fully accounted for in the data. So what we assume here is we assume that the government choose to increase VAT, applying on most of the consumption, and this would need to be increased by about 1.4% from the current level. Now, as for the baseline scenario, as for the Social Security system, we also assume that it's indexed to average income growth, but this will also make the Social Security fund to run out by the year 2045. So here is the balance of the Social Security fund. We are quite at the initial phase of the Social Security fund, and we are currently running surplus. But this is mainly due to that initially there are more contributors to the fund than the pensioners that get money from the fund. So as the time goes on, then we can see that the amount of pensioners will increase, as well as the amount of contributors will also slow down due to aging. And this will put further pressure on the fund, making the fund run out, which is by our model is around 2045. So to make the social security fund sustainable, we assume that contribution rate need to be increased, and this needs to be increased by quite a lot, from 3% each from employee and employer to more than 20%. And this is quite a big jump in contribution rate to sustain the fund.
You have 3 more minutes. 3 minutes.
Oh, 3 more minutes. Okay. Okay, I'm taking too long. So I'll skip some of the slides. So the idea is what we can see is that even by indexing all these two systems, the funds are still inadequate. So we consider two reforms to make all this fund adequate. The first one is to increase the universal pension to the poverty line, and the second one is to use the pension tested. So we increase the universal pension, but we pension test it to the social security income. So both of these two reforms are costly, but pension tested reform will be cheaper to the government. And we can also see that the effects on poverty reduction is actually slightly better on the pension tested reform, because we can increase VAT by less amount. And this means that those required help from the government will get a help, but those who are already rich will require less finance from the government. And in terms of welfare, we can also see welfare improvement using these two reforms. So, and the welfare improved the most for the primarily educated, because these are the group of people that does not pay much in terms of cost to the reform, because their consumption is quite low. When the rich or the college educated will be worse off from the reform, because these are the people who consume the most. So they pay most the cost of the reform. So we can see the resource redistribution here from the rich to the poor, and this helps the poor become better off, and at aggregate, it also make the welfare better off, right? So just to conclude, here, if no action is taken, the pension schemes are inadequate and unsustainable, and we can see that index benefit lead to a drastic increase in VAT and contribution rate, but even that these two systems are still inadequate. So we consider two reforms, and all these reforms are very expensive. It can generate disincentive to save and work. They are welfare improving. So actually what we need here in Thailand is harmonizing the current fragmented schemes so that we can mean test or pension test, so that we can reform with lower cost compared to the changing in the universal pension. So I'll just end it there.
Thank you, Phitawat. And I propose that we move to, in any case, for me, closer to my home, to Algeria. And Farid.
Good morning, everyone, and maybe good afternoon or good evening for some of you. So I'm very happy for this opportunity to speak at the IPRA conference. Today, I am Farid Flici, a researcher from the Research Center in Applied Economics for Development in Algiers, Algeria. And today, I will be speaking about the limits of parametric reform. So the Algerian system is one pillar system based on pay-as-you-go principle, is composed by two schemes, one for salaried workers managed by the CNR, and another one for self-employed workers. And it's managed by the CASNOS. In this work, we focus only on the salaried worker schemes, which cover almost 90% of total retirees. Retirement age is 16 for men and 55 for women. The first pension benefits is estimated as the product of 2.5, which is an annuity factor, by the duration of contribution, and by W star, which is the final
wage or the average wage of the 5 years of activity. So 32 years is the maximum duration of contribution, and it leads to a replacement rate of 80% of the final wage. And each year, the pension benefits is upgraded by 5% to fit inflation. So how does it's just a reminder about the mechanism how the pay-as-you-go system works. So if we consider this plot on the left, the blue correspond to the working age, where a worker is asked to pay contribution and to get some retirement benefits at retirement age, which is represented here in green color. That's from the point of view of one generation or from one person point of view. But from the retirement provider point of view, what matters is this balance between the total contributions and the total expenses, which is very tied to the balance between the population at working age of retirees and the population of workers. And here and because of this, that aging matters. If we look at this pyramid, which represents the expected evolution of the Algerian population pyramid of Algeria from 2020 to 2070, and here on the right side, we observe the evolution, the expected evolution of the ratio of the population at working age for one people at retirement. Actually, we are at a value of 6.5, but this ratio is expected to fall down and to reach a value of 2.5 per 2045, and we can imagine the effect that this will have on the financial balance of the retirement system, which start already to face some difficulties of financial deficit starting from 2003. And in my opinion, the situation will be worse in the coming decades. We already published the work in co-authoring with Frédéric Blanchet from Lyon in France. About the financial sustainability of the Algerian retirement system for the coming 50 years, but it's based on one scenario. And here we are wondering if parametric reforms will be enough to ensure long-term sustainability within the changing environment. That's the research question that we are trying to answer in this presentation. So coming back to the methodology and the literature review, I had a look on the literature on the assessment of the financial sustainability of retirement system all over the world, and it seemed for me that most retirement sustainability assessment methodology or studies in the literature are either one scenario based or there is just a limited case where a limited number of scenarios are compared. We can see it, for example, Wang and we treated the case of China in 2019. So here in this paper, we are proposing to crossing different combination of reform actions with the scenario about the future evolution of the environment. In total, we had 100,000 combination of reforms action, and we used the 20 hours for given the analysis. We took 15 scenarios for mortality, 3 scenarios for mortality, and 5 for the employment, for salaried employment rate, for the affiliation of salaried workers for social security, 3 scenarios also for wage evolution and for the collection. That's the environment table. We have the system variable or the parameters that the CNR or the retirement provider can handle in order to keep the system sustainable for the long run. We have the age of retirement, the reference wage period, the contribution rate, and the annuity rate. So I will not go into a detailed explanation of the methodology that we have used for assessing the financial sustainability, because we don't have enough time. That the most important thing is how we
we use this data to estimate the future retirement expenses. What we proposed in Flici and Planche 2018 is that for each cohort of retirees, we estimate the expected duration of contribution. This value is used to estimate the average first pension benefits for this cohort, and then we continue with the 5% each year. We upgrade the pension benefits by 5 years yearly. Represent 80% of the total direct pension benefits, while administration fees represent only 1.5%. So what data is needed? We need 3 types of data. We have first the population data. So we did population projections and multi-scenario population projections up to 2070. We need contribution surface, or the surface of the age-specific probability of contribution to CNR, which is estimated based on the employment rate surface, the salaried employment rate surface, and finally the affiliation Social Security surface. And the third information that we need is the salary surface. So that's the result we obtained with the population projections. And we observe here in the top left, it's lowest population growth expected, while in the bottom left is the maximum population growth that we can get up to 2018. That's an overview about the employment data in Algeria. So 42% of the population at working age are active or are supplying their labor force on the labor market. 37 are employed, with 30% only are salaried workers, and only 70% are affiliated to Social Security. Having this data by age, it allows to obtain this plot on the right side of the table, which represent the age-specific probability to contribute for Social Security as salaried workers. And when we sum up all these probabilities, we obtain what we call the expected duration of contribution. And here, for example, for men, it's 40 years, and for women, it's less than 5 years, but it's an average on the global population at working age. That's the surface of the age-specific probabilities to contribute for Social Security as salaried workers, males and females, and we have 2D presentation in the low, in the upper side is the 3D, and in the low side is the 2D. How to read this? For example, in this example, this point corresponds to an individual aged 42 years in 1990, which has a probability of 45% to be to contribute to Social Security for as salaried workers. And it's like this that we estimate the expected duration of contribution by retracting back the history of contribution of each individual or each cohort reaching the retirement age. That's the salary surface that we use to estimate the salaries used to estimate the contributions, and also the final wage estimate used as a reference to estimate the pension benefits. That's the results. The dark line represents the baseline scenario, which means that we assume that environment will either keep constant or follow its recent evolutions, and now reform actions are taken, while the other lines in gray represent the results or the financial balance of the CNR obtained until under the different scenario. And what we observe here, that in the best condition, what I mean by the best condition, that means that heavy reforms action are taken, and which meet also, on the other hand, a very favorable environment change. In these two conditions, the current design of the system can only keep sustainability until 2014. So the pension provider in Algeria will be asked to plan some heavy reforms, not only parametric costs, but change the system or implement some second or third pillar.
thank you for your attention, and here's some references that we have used in this work. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to close the session formally with a small round of applause for the presenters.